What's up, everybody? It's your man, Swain. Listen, I am back for an amazing conversation. I promise you want to see the whole thing right here with the CEO of Birthright Africa, Gala El Sheikh. Thank you so much for being with me again. You're here in Ghana again.
Yes. Again. I couldn't stay away.
Wow. So, what brought you here this time?
Well, it's really crazy because I got back to the States in New York in mid-January, and my intention was to wait till August. The work of Birthright Africa now does bring me here. However, I got there winter time and just the environment of what's happening, the vibration of the States within like a couple of weeks. I was like, I work on my computer. I telework. Why am I here if I don't have to be? Because the spiritual, mental just is not balanced for me, especially right now. And so I booked a ticket for April. I was like, I can't do more than 2-3 months away from the motherland. My spirit, my heart keeps calling for myself to be here.
Now, we talked extensively on the last conversation that we had about Birthright, what it is, and even your journey, just getting to this place of, let's say, Afrocentric consciousness.
Yes. Ooh, that's a good one, Tim. So, I like that. I'm going to start using that.
Well, there you go. So, but for the folks who didn't see that one, maybe just bring us up to speed and just give us some little insight of what Birthright Africa is and some of those core components of what you all strive to do.
Sure. So, in a nutshell, it's really a global movement for us as a people to connect. We at Birthright Africa are targeting our young African diaspora. We are committed to providing a free educational trip for every youth and young adult.
Did you say free?
Free.
Free 99.
Free 99 to every youth and young adult of African descent, ages 13 to 30, in collaboration with education partners. And because it's just so life-changing, that pride, that confidence and connection that sparks the creativity for you to really fulfill on your career and life goals. That we call it a heritage-based leadership development. It's so essential, especially for us who've been disconnected from the truth of the greatness of who we are, right? Because of enslavement and colonization, which really, if you think about it, was this moment in time in history that broke us apart from all that value of who we are, and really stripped the value for the benefit of other groups. And so we're reclaiming it in a nutshell. And for me, I'm proud to bring my business background, my passion for education, and love of the culture, and being of Sudanese descent myself, but having grown up in the States and feeling very disconnected over time to the work, and just really rally all of us to go on this Birthright journey as even the leaders and entrepreneurs and those of us who are over 30 to bring this opportunity to young people, and in that way we also get to connect.
Wow. So where exactly are some of the places that Birthright takes these young leaders in Africa? What countries?
So I'll actually mention, before we get to Africa, we start exploration in the United States. Okay. It was very critical for me as the visionary of this to realize that we don't even know our history as Black people in the States, right? Because when you think about the history that's told, it's a very white Eurocentric one. Yeah. So you don't really know not only the story of slavery to the details, right? If we get any history, it tends to be, okay, we had slavery, then we fought for our freedoms, civil rights, got Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King. I bet you
now Barack Obama, then that's probably it.
Okay, then there we go, right.
Then that's it.
Then we got the Obamas, and it's post-racial. We're good, right?
Yeah.
No. And so it's very critical that we start the exploration in the U.S. We have our young people start where they are locally exploring. We partnered with the City University of New York as our first education partner, and we go to the cultural sites, the museums there. We meet with leaders and entrepreneurs of African descent that are already building up their present day legacy into the future, so that the young people see that future version of themselves. They go to another state. In this case, it was Washington, D.C., go to the museums, cultural sites, meet leaders, entrepreneurs there. And then it culminates on the continent. So you can also make the connections between, the history in the diaspora and the history on the continent. And it's life-changing. We started with Ghana, naturally, gateway to Africa, for all the reasons that I think most of us know. I'm happy to go into those if you'd like me to.
Please.
Well, it's...
Because someone might ask, if you're of Sudanese descent,
Yeah.
why not start with your home place?
That's a good question. Well, we have to go first where it's been politically safe and stable. And that just wasn't the case at the moment in Sudan. We're definitely working our way there. We just are transitioning into democratic rule. So the level of stability here and just the history of that connection of the diaspora. You had the Martin Luther Kings, the Malcolm X's, the W.E.B. Du Bois that came here because of that Pan-African spirit that was connected even to the diaspora with the Kwame Nkrumahs of the world. And so you get that history, then you have the dungeons, the visible evidence of the enslavement. And so it's just a combination of that along with the level of welcoming that happens. Literally the way you say hello is akwaba, which means welcome. And the hospitality of the Ghanaian people is out of this world.
Wow. So let me ask you a question about the trips and actually the leadership experience that takes place before you get to the continent. What I've seen is that when we've tried to educate youth with some of the initiatives that we do, even when we look at these historical sites, it's difficult because everything starts with slavery. So in your experience, do you find historical sites and even curriculum that gives us something that comes pre-slavery?
Absolutely. That may not happen necessarily in America.
And that's my question.
Which
America.
is why you got to get to Africa, right? Because the history, there are professors, and of course there's professors on the American side too. But it's another thing when you're on the continent, learning the continent's history. There's just another level of significance to it and connection to it, I believe. And so we've been to the universities of Ghana and the likes to hear about the things we created and invented from the beginning of time. And so then you realize our history doesn't start with slavery and colonization. It starts with all these other contributions, right? Keyword contributions that we've made to the world. And so then you start to pick up as a young person, oh, so that's really who I am. The leader, the creator, the innovator that was just stripped away during enslavement and colonization. That's really the reclamation. In addition to hearing that history, we're very intentional. I was, in my work of college and career readiness and education, I realized the biggest missing piece, especially for youth and young adults of African descent and others of color, they're not seeing enough of themselves in leadership and entrepreneurship positions. I felt that, coming of age as a finance professional. Where are the Black leaders that I should be looking at as the model and example? So you doubt yourself, you start wondering if you're being perceived as a leader, and then there's all the microaggressions and racism that come to play out in your, progression as a professional. We counteract that with making sure they're hearing these career and life stories. We have innovation panels of folks that have achieved the most amazing things, are still in the grind of fulfilling their aspirations in leadership and entrepreneurship, but just seeing that future version of yourself now, 5, 10, 15 years older than you, it totally flips the switch. And we've had alumni really explain that part of the programming has really been life-changing as well. And we don't sugarcoat. We ensure that we ask, what racism, what microaggressions did you face? Getting to the point of where you are now, a vice president of this, or you've raised your millions of dollars in your tech startup, and they let us know it is real. And so that way you realize you're not alone and you don't internalize the oppression.
Wow. So what are some of those ways, that oppression, those microaggressions can be internalized? Because I'm sure that, who knows who may see this. And they may be feeling these things, but they don't have a name for it. They can't call it something. And especially in our community as Black folks in America, many of us are spiritual. Doesn't mean we have the same kind of, theological background, but many of us are spiritual, and so sometimes we just believe like let's just be good, and these bad things that I feel, maybe it's me. Microaggressions, internalized oppression. What does that look like? Even how did it look like for you? And how did you recognize that what it was?
So I can look back now and recognize it for what it was, because at the time, I graduated '02, and so we didn't have these words. We didn't have this language.
Microaggression, no.
Diversity and inclusion was really early in stages.
And
so it was just the pipeline. We got to get we don't have enough of a pipeline. That's why we don't see the leaders.
Yeah.
And honestly, I can now look back and say, for me, and I've heard this from others as well, it's the working double as hard and not even realizing it, because you're compensating for something that is being potentially perceived. It's not wanting to make the mistake, because if I make the mistake, then I have messed it up for the rest of us.
We all make the mistake, yeah.
And so that perfectionism that happens when you're in the room and or just at work and not wanting to say when you need some kind of extra support or help, and you'll work that extra hour too to just figure something out, when actually what you've missed out on is the opportunity to collaborate with your teammates, to show that vulnerability, but you don't feel that you have that permission, right? And so then you don't speak up. Anytime you feel like you're gonna hold back on stating what you are dealing with, even feeling at work, because it's relevant to your performance. It's really ultimately relevant to the goal and the project, but you feel hesitant for whatever reason, and it tends to be some kind of relationship or trust you don't think you've had or built up. Then there's more overt things, obviously, when you don't get the promotion and someone more underqualified is getting that. I didn't necessarily experience that, thankfully. But then there's the other type of more social interaction, like not being invited to lunch by your white colleagues.
So not being invited to the cookout where the potato salad and raisins are there.
Or the weekends, right? The golf trip or this, and just there's the invisibility that you may want to partake, or they know, okay, maybe this is not cultural, or she's not as exposed, or he's not, probably doing this kind of stuff because they're black, right? It's so unconscious. It's not even something that person's really knowing is happening as a microaggression.
And then the fact that we have to think about all of that all of the time in itself is enough to drive us crazy, because it's not just these things that are happening. This is my job, for example, and I may not feel like I can speak out, but then it's impacting my performance, which impacts my paycheck, which impacts how I pay my bills, which impacts maybe who's dependent on me. Maybe mom, dad is dependent on me, or I have a family. So it's a lot. In my case, I said that one of the great things about the work that people like you are doing is it raises the consciousness of our people. But I think sometimes the drawback for people like me is, like, once you become conscious of who you are, you become unapologetic. So my last position that I worked in higher education was probably one of the best and worst experiences I had, because I was the most comfortable in my blackness that I've ever been. And I knew exactly why I was at my job.
Right.
And I served with purpose. So I didn't have time to do certain things that was not in my job description in terms of socialization or whatever. I didn't laugh at the jokes anymore.
Okay.
Some people know how to do that very well, but the jokes that I used to now I'm like, oh, okay.
Well, actually, we're being asked to not laugh anymore. We're actually being asked to speak up and say that's not okay.
But doesn't that get tiring to always, if you always that person, right? You have to be the spokesperson for black women, black men, black people, African people. Doesn't that become tiring? And at what point do you just decide, okay, let me just be quiet? Because it costs me too much to always speak out. And then, and I know you've experienced this, when you're speaking out and it's just like, you ever seen that meme or like there's like a guy that's yelling at a brick wall?
Yes. Yeah.
And when a person feels that way, you're speaking out, you're being intentional, you're trying to communicate, but on the other side, people are just like...
Well, I will tell you, I had an experience that actually showed me the opposite. And I think this is when you also have to believe you are working at an organizational culture that is trying to be better. You can tell through the leadership. I'm talking about executive levels, management levels. if you speak up, they're willing to listen, hear, ask questions, and possibly even chime in, then that's a place to stay, and it's worth putting the energy and speaking up, because the change is happening.
I get you.
Right? At the end of the day, if you don't even attempt it, you will never know. We tend to have this like, oh, I just want to do a good job. Let me put my head down. I'll be recognized for my performance. No, that's not going to happen. You have to speak about not only what's going wrong, but what you're doing that's really great, and how you're performing and supporting and contributing, because you're just proud.
Yeah.
That goes back to this pride and confidence that we instill through Birthright Africa. I had an experience where, I mean, my heart was palpitating. And but I'm so glad I said it. And it was intended for black professionals at the finance firm that I was at the time. And these were like partner level folks trying to learn and understand what could be done, especially to support the analyst level and higher to get into the pipeline of leadership. And so I spoke up because one of my colleagues was not there at the event, because she thought it was more important to work and complete
I can understand
a report.
that. I can see
and
that.
so in my mind, I'm like, why isn't she telling her manager so that she could be at this event? Because ultimately that is supposed to support her in her professional growth. And so I said something. I was like, it's not, because, there tends to be this like, it's put on us to always speak up. And I'm like, where is the accountability on the manager? Why doesn't that manager know that this event is happening, and it's important for him to support his colleague, his junior person, to be at the event and say, you know what, this report can wait an hour, or maybe this other person should do the report. I speak up in front of these partners, mostly white men, and then folks in the audience that are also, but the folks that were at the manager level and maybe even not chimed in and supported what I was saying, right? So I took this risk as a junior person. I must have been no more than like 23, 24. But I felt in my heart and just like my intuition as a leader that I should be supported by my manager for anything related to my growth as a professional, especially as it relates to diversity and inclusion. So by taking that risk, I could now see, okay, this firm really wants to learn and understand it. And they thought it was such a good idea, and now it's par for the course. Now we're talking finally, what I'm starting to see coming out of this Black Lives Matter moment. Folks were starting to ask, where are the black leaders? We've been asking that question at Birthright Africa since the very beginning, which we, incorporated in 2015 and launched our first program in 2017. But the idea came to me in 2004. 2004 is when I was working as this young professional, experiencing these things around what now I know is microaggression. And so I've built it into the program. But now it's so great to see everyone else is catching up, and it feels like the ideas around managers just being as accountable, regardless of their racial background, to the concepts of diversity. It has to be in the performance metrics for managers, and that's basically, I guess, what I was asking for, not knowing at the time.
And that's a lot of times where it shows up. I mean, in my previous position, it was. We won't even go into that, but I mean, I saw how my unapologetic blackness was showing up in the performing metrics, and it was actually the first job I've ever been written up at in my whole entire life. And I've been working for a minute.
Right.
But anyway, so as we look at all these dynamics, it mirrors what's happening right now in the U.S. in terms of this kind of awakening.
Yeah.
And someone mentioned that in the States, there's often this pendulum of black consciousness that swings back and forth depending on the generation.
Yeah.
Progress happens, and then it goes back towards kind of passivism.
Yeah.
Probably messed that word up, but you know what I'm trying to say.
I grew up in the passive decade.
So what's happening right now from what you see on the ground with the individuals that you're connecting with, bringing them to Ghana? What are they feeling about what's happening in the States, and what is their sensitivity towards reconnecting with their roots? And is it important to them, and how are their attitudes towards that? Does that make sense?
About the scholars that are getting
or even just people in general from your experience.
And I mean, the whole Birthright tribe, shout out to them. But I would, let's go with the scholars, because they're the ones seeking this. We have 23,000 young people registered right now with Birthright Africa. We have done little to minimum advertising of our mission. So clearly there's a consciousness.
That means people who are like, that said they have an interest in being a part of the system, or people you've impacted?
Who want 23,000 who've registered to get the Birthright trip.
23,000?
Yes, with little to no advertising. And so we have young people or their parents, ages 13 to 30, saying, I want to know who I really am.
Yeah.
I want to connect to this ancestral history because I realized I'm missing a big piece of the story. I'm not getting it in the U.S. And that's literally what I felt.
Yeah.
I felt that for myself, and I was like, if I need this, a whole bunch of us must. And so I have to be a part of this movement. And I also knew it was like way bigger than me. So I started the journey and basically was like, let me bring everyone along. So these young people are seeking this opportunity. They get here and it's like the myths of war, poverty, disease are just dispelled, and it's, you know, really connecting at a level of feeling like home. We've had, especially Caribbean American scholars who are like, oh, this is just like Jamaica and Barbados. Well, of course, your ancestors were brought over, but those traditions didn't die. And I think there's something powerful in knowing that too. The music you hear, the mannerisms, the lady that looks like your aunt, this person that looks like your cousin, or you getting mistaken for being from the culture. And even if you're not, you're seeing your peer scholar get mistaken. So there's just these connections. Some people find out their names are part of the language. I just found out that in Ga, my name Wala means life. I just had a birthright moment myself as a leader, and I've been in this work for years. We've had young people who now are like, I can see myself living and working here. They all definitely want to come back multiple times on their own. We actually have one of our first scholars coming to Guinea for her friend's wedding.
Wow.
But the fact that they can see themselves living and working here from one trip at such a young age, and not talking about 10, 15 years later. I'm talking about within the next year to 5. Now, this is now in their progression.
Now, how long do they normally spend when they come?
10 days.
So within 10 days, all of this happens. You know, it's really powerful to me because I think about what can happen in 10 days can be more significant than 12 years of formal education.
So that's why travel is the best education. And I knew that intuitively, having grown up as a diplomat's child. So I had the privilege of living abroad, if you will. I was born in Sudan, but my first recollections are actually in Sweden. And I grew up there till the age of 7. Then we were back in Sudan for about a year. And then in Uganda, I went to an American international school. And there I was exposed to so much culture. And again, another country. We go back to Sudan before the government is taken over by dictatorship. And then we sought refuge in America. But yeah, like my exposure as such a young person made me realize, like, once I got to America, I wasn't as hung up or caught up in feeling limited.
I get you,
It only took, until I understood what being black in America was, right? Then you start having your hang-ups. But our young people, some have never left the U.S. before. And so for them to say Africa was the first place to go to, as an African descended person, when most of us have really like thought about Europe first. It's literally shifting that consciousness to realize, like, no, let me go to where my ancestral home is first.
Wow. So 23,000 folks that are registered in this system. And, you know, I do trips myself, and what I see is people want to come. There's no shortage of people who want to come. So how do we get these 23,000, and which will increase? How do we get them all to experience what we have experienced multiple times? How do we do that?
Well, first, since we're still coming out of a pandemic, we've pivoted to virtual. And we have a really great innovative program on self-exploration that's going to actually be driven by the young person to explore themselves through the lens of Black African descent with their own interests, post that on social media. In addition to that, we're creating videos and virtual homecomings. We did an IG Live of the Cape Coast Dungeon. We actually pulled it off with a few glitches here and there. We're talking to our alumni and having them share their perspectives. We're going to basically try to recreate some of the day in the life of a Birthright scholar, in addition to these self-driven explorations. As far as, ultimately we're trying to travel to the motherland. Being virtual is
it gets the appetite wet.
It gets the appetite wet. We also are going to build that as our portfolio process for scholars, and they're going to use their scholar portfolio to apply to an education partner, which is housing a Birthright program. So that's how we're going to be able to actualize this in scale and support the 23 young people with getting to the continent. What I learned as an education leader is how the nonprofits that are around the country set up to impact at scale are operating. And so I just brought that knowledge and understanding to Birthright, and we built this collaborative partnership model I'm very proud of that will support both technically and just guide our Birthright programs to establish and coordinate, facilitate the local, national, and global exploration, while we refer these scholars to apply to those programs, in addition to the participants that are already with our partners. And in that way, we can, engage with anyone around the country who's, what I realized too is, like, I'm not the only person of African descent in leadership and education that wants to bring this opportunity. So how do we build a mission and a vision that really taps all of us as leaders and educators to do so? And from what we saw in our pilot and subsequent cohorts, we had 4 cohorts go for the year of return. So to date, we've had over 60 young people. But I recognized in our partners, the leaders and educators that wanted to create the programming. So it clicked for me as a startup founder. We're now in our 5 years, but over this last 5 years, we've really been honing in on what this could look like. Our leaders and educators are more than capable to drive this. And in addition, when you're over 30, you now get impacted as a Birthright facilitator. And so we're also very clear that in addition to the scholars being of African descent, the facilitators must be of African descent too. This is how I get to be, and we get to be unapologetically Black, because we need that safe space to talk about, feel whatever it is without the white fragility, without some of those hang-ups. And now we get to even bring folks over 30 that are involved, that can go to Africa with their travel costs covered.
Wow. Someone hearing this right now for the first time, regardless of their age, they are excited about what's going on with Birthright. The next question is, where do I fit in? Like, what can I do just to get connected? I don't know what the next step is. I just want to get connected. What do they do?
Definitely start following all our social medias. We're on basically all the platforms. And on our website, you can join our newsletter. You can read the frequently asked questions to see where you fit in. Read about what we do, because we display the collaborative partnership model. If you're a young person, obviously register with us. There's a section for you to do that. If you're working at a high school, college, or community-based organization, we have our education partner section. You can submit your interest to let us know you're working with young people of African descent and want to bring that opportunity, bring the Birthright program to your school or community. And if you're a leader and entrepreneur, we need you to come speak to the young people. Your story as a person of African descent that has actually achieved and aspired, especially if you've been to the continent, you have a perspective. Or if you're based here, obviously, we're going to come and look to connect with you in Ghana, South Africa, Senegal. There's a whole host of countries. We're actually agnostic. We have our targets, of course, but as long as it's deemed safe to travel, we're open. It's Birthright Africa. So you can find yourself. And worst case, if you still can't figure it out after reading the frequently asked questions, you can submit an email and let us know who you are, and we'll connect with you.
What's been the best thing about being in Ghana this time for you?
This last time? Okay, so this is my second time doing a month stint. And I
came at a good time. The weather's nice. I mean, the trees are blowing and you see the little background.
So the rainy season is coming in. That's always nice. Honestly, it's just constant affirmation of being here. I don't know if it's any one thing this time around. Oh, you know what? I will say this, because this is part of my purpose of being here, not just the spiritual and mental break from the U.S., but there are business relationships, partnerships, and relationships we're cultivating as Birthright Africa on the continent. Not just for the program, but just as a whole, for folks to be aware that this mission and movement is now here. That we have a vehicle, we have a way in which this connection can happen at scale for young people, because once we change that young person's life, we've actually changed generations after.
Yeah.
This is to transform the African diaspora for future generations to come. And I'm very clear that that is something everyone on the continent needs to be aware of. And so I'm connecting, I would say a highlight was being invited to the groundbreaking of the Pan-African Heritage Museum. I didn't even know it was happening. So those are the moments when you realize like, okay, the universe, the ancestors gave you some intuition that you needed to be here at this time. That happens to me almost every time.
Wow.
And the Pan-African Heritage Museum is literally going to tell the story of all of us of African descent in this one place, so that it is clear who we really are. And we get to tell that narrative of our greatness unapologetically. And then I get to meet the founder, who has heard of Birthright Africa after.
Wow. Wow.
He wants to now meet with me, and we've actually met already. We're about to have dinner. And that's the other thing, building relationships in Ghana in particular. I haven't yet started my trips to other countries. I can't wait to get there. But everyone is so looking to connect. I'm really honing in on this community vibe, and that's another thing our scholars tell us. Within a day or two, they know what the difference of an individualistic society is versus a communal, collective one. And for them, being tapped into that indigenousness of who they really are as human beings that want to connect to their ancestry, and knowing that our ancestry is about community, allows you to feel that trust and sense of self that you may not feel all the time in the States.
Wow. It's an amazing initiative, and just like the representative of the Pan-African Heritage Museum, I found out about Birthright just because I was searching, we need black folks to go to Africa for free, because Jewish people get to do it, so black folks get to do it. So to sit down with you for a second time is definitely a privilege. I mean, it's an honor. I mean, I'm grateful just to just to see someone take their imagination and turn it into something that has changed countless people's lives. So I'm grateful for the opportunity. I know you're very busy because you got a bunch of stuff you're doing here in the country. But thank you so much for being with me. I'm really appreciative of it. Any final thing that you want to say to folks?
Yes, we are having a September virtual gala, which means anyone around the world can tune in September 29th. And we're really excited because this is our coming out party.
Wow.
And Jidenna, the Nigerian-American artist and educator.
He's the man.
Educator, first and foremost, is now on our executive board and will be co-chairing the gala.
That's
huge.
huge.
It's huge because now we can really share it with some influential folks.
Yeah.
And folks of high net worth, and just really anyone that can support. This is going to take a lot of us being a part of it. Not just the money, but really the commitment to show up for ourselves and for each other. Because the long term is this legacy building. What we say we do is connection and transformation, legacy that leads to wealth building. And what Jidenna has really helped us understand is we're nation building.
Yeah, that's
creating leaders and entrepreneurs is nation building, and we're doing it on both sides, right? Whether you choose to stay in the States or choose to come to Africa, you're now positioned to help globally ensure that Black people are building up communities, and that ultimately leads to building up nations. And we're so thrilled for that and for everyone to be a part of it.
Wow. Once again, thank you so much. And listen, you have all the information right there in the description below. You see it. Make sure you go to the website right now. Make sure you also, by the time this is out, hopefully the event, people can register for the event.
Yes, it should come out in like another week or two.
All right, so it's
today.
there. It's there. You see it right there. So make sure you register for the event as well. I sincerely appreciate you. Always, if you like this content, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like the video. Until next time, peace.